man saves a woman from a snakebite in the wilderness, only to discover she's the heiress to a fortune and now refuses to leave his side. The venom is spreading fast. You have to stay with me. Caleb's voice was steady, urgent, firm, like a hand reaching through the fog of panic. What are you doing with those leaves? Am I going to die? Lynn gasped, her breath short and sharp, eyes wide with terror as pain shot up her leg like fire licking through her veins. Caleb did not answer immediately. His hands moved with practiced precision, crushing the dark green leaves between his fingers until they bled a pungent, earthy sap. He pressed them against the puncture wound just above her ankle, where the snake had struck with terrifying speed only minutes earlier. "This will help slow the venom," he said. "I need you to keep your eyes on me. Do not pass out." Lynn clenched her fists into the soft dirt, biting back a scream as the herbal poultice began to burn into her skin. Her heart was pounding so hard it drowned out the sounds of the forest around them. Her mind reeled with disbelief. This was supposed to be just another solo trek, another weekend of challenging herself, clearing her head, escaping the high-rising prison of her life back in Portland. She had researched the trail, prepared meticulously, but nothing in her guides or gear had prepared her for this. A venomous snakebite miles away from civilization, without cell service, and now being treated by a stranger who had appeared from the trees like some spirit of the woods. Caleb looked up at her, dark brows drawn together. His eyes were intense but not unkind, lined by sun and time. "Breathe. You are going to be all right," he said, reaching into the small leather satchel slung across his chest. He pulled out a small vial of a dark liquid, uncorked it, and offered it to her. "Drink this. It is bitter, but it will help." Lynn hesitated, then took it with trembling hands. The taste was as vile as he promised, like bark and metal and something ancient, but she forced it down. She had no choice. Her leg was swelling fast, the pain mounting, and the world was starting to spin at the edges. "What? Who are you?" she managed, her voice a rasp. "Caleb." "Caleb Walker," he replied without looking at her, already gathering more herbs from a nearby bush. "I live out here, off-grid. You were lucky I was nearby. I was hiking. Her words slurred, her head lolled to one side. "No, no, no," Caleb said sharply, moving back to her side. He tapped her cheek gently. "Lynn, right? That is your name, yes? I saw it on the tag inside your pack. Lynn, stay with me." She blinked, forcing her eyes open. "You went through my stuff?" "To find your name. I am not a thief." His tone was dry, practical. "Now hold still. I need to make a small incision." Lynn's breath hitched. "Wait, what? No. No knives. It is either this or the venom keeps spreading," Caleb said. He was already pulling a small, sterilized blade from his bag. "Just a shallow cut. I need to relieve the pressure and drain what I can. You will be all right." She whimpered as the blade touched her skin, but she did not pull away. Her hand dug into the earth, fingernails scraping bark and dirt. "I hate this. I hate this," she murmured. "I know," Caleb said, "but you are doing great." The minutes dragged on like hours. Caleb worked with focused efficiency, applying pressure, changing out the herbal poultice, wrapping her leg with a rough cloth that smelled like pine and smoke. He was calm, deliberate. His presence anchored her, kept her from slipping completely into the darkness that was pulling at the edges of her vision. When the worst of it had passed, Caleb sat back on his heels and wiped the sweat from his brow. "We need to get you somewhere safe. My cabin is about a mile from here. I will carry you." "You don't have to," Lynn started, but she could barely lift her head. "I do," he said simply, lifting her with surprising gentleness. Her head rested against his shoulder, the warmth of him oddly comforting. The forest blurred past in a haze of green and gold and pain. As they moved through the trees, Lynn fought to stay conscious. The rhythm of Caleb's steps was steady, like a heartbeat. She listened to it, focused on it, let it guide her away from the panic and into a strange sense of trust. Somewhere deep in the woods, a hawk cried overhead. The wind whispered through the treetops. And in Caleb's arms, Lynn closed her eyes, not in surrender but in fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she would live through this day. The cabin appeared like a mirage through the trees, a modest wooden structure tucked against a rise in the land, half camouflaged by ferns and shadows. Caleb pushed the door open with his shoulder and carried Lynn inside, her weight light but urgent in his arms. He laid her gently on a cot layered with rough wool blankets, then moved with practiced speed. No time for comfort, only survival. There was no electricity, no hum of machines. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire he stoked in the stone hearth and Lynn's ragged breaths. He crushed dried herbs in a mortar, added them to a pot of boiling water over the fire, the smell rising, sharp, medicinal, bitter. As the tincture brewed, he returned to her side, checked the swelling on her leg. It had spread further, veins darkening around the wound. She stirred, her face pale, slick with sweat. "Caleb." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It hurts." "I know," he said, his voice low and even. "I am making something that will help. Stay still." She mumbled something he did not catch, then flinched as a wave of pain struck her again. He reached for the cooled herbal paste and gently replaced the dressing on her wound. His touch was careful, deliberate, but the sight of her suffering clenched something deep in his chest. As the minutes crawled by, Lynn drifted in and out of consciousness. She mumbled fragments, incoherent thoughts, and half-buried memories. Caleb leaned in closer, trying to understand. "My father," she murmured. "He'll lose it if I die here." Caleb's brow furrowed. "Your father?" "He'll send helicopters. He always overreacts." He paused, studying her face. She looked like someone who had lived in comfort, her clothes high quality, her skin soft despite the dirt and sweat. That single sentence painted a picture. A rich girl, likely from the city, rebelling against a life too controlled. She had probably come here for adventure, to feel alive, and now she was paying the price. Still, he said nothing. Assumptions were dangerous. He just needed to keep her alive. The potion was ready. Caleb returned with a steaming cup of the foul-smelling liquid, lifted her head, and coaxed it to her lips. "Drink! I know it tastes bad, but it will help flush the toxins." She obeyed weakly, coughing as it burned down her throat. The hours that followed blurred together. Caleb sat beside her, changing her bandage, wiping her forehead, listening to the hiss of the wind outside and the ticking beat of her life slowly slipping from danger, or so he thought. Near midnight her breathing changed. It was shallow, slower. "Lynn," he called softly. "Lynn, open your eyes." No response. "Hey, look at me," he said, louder this time, panic creeping into his voice. "Come on, you're not done yet." She let out a rattling exhale, and then nothing. "Damn it!" Caleb snapped into motion, yanking back the blanket and placing his ear near her chest. No breath. Her pulse was faint, almost gone. He started CPR without hesitation. Compressions, breaths, compressions, his hands pressed against her sternum with precision born from training and desperation. "Come on, you are not going to die in my cabin, do you hear me?" he growled through gritted teeth. Another breath. More compressions. Sweat ran down his neck. The firelight flickered wildly, casting shadows across the cabin walls as if the forest itself were holding its breath. "Lynn," he shouted. "Breathe!" Her body jolted and then she gasped, eyes snapping open wide in shock and fear. She choked on air, her hands flailing until he caught them gently. "Easy, easy, you are back," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "You are safe." She stared at him, terrified, confused. I couldn't. Everything went dark." "You stopped breathing," Caleb said, "but I got you back." Her eyes welled with tears and she turned her face away, ashamed, vulnerable. "I thought I was strong." "You are," he said softly. "You just faced something bigger than strength." He sat beside her, watching as her breathing steadied, chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. Her pulse was still weak, but it was there, alive, present. Outside, the wind shifted. The night grew quieter. Inside, beside the fire, two strangers sat in silence, one barely clinging to life, the other guarding it like a fragile flame. Sunlight spilled through the small window of the cabin, casting golden streaks across the rough wooden floor. The scent of herbs and wood smoke lingered in the air, mingling with the gentle crackle of a dying fire. Lynn stirred beneath the blankets, her eyes fluttering open to a world that felt strangely unfamiliar and entirely real. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. Then the pain in her leg returned, dull but present, anchoring her to the truth. She pushed herself up slightly, wincing, and looked around. The room was sparse but warm. Shelves lined with jars of dried leaves and roots, tools neatly arranged, books stacked haphazardly in a corner. It was primitive, yet somehow comforting. Her gaze fell on Caleb, who was sitting silently at a table near the hearth, grinding something in a mortar, his brow furrowed in quiet concentration. "You saved me," she said, her voice raspy. He looked up, calm but alert. "You scared me," he replied. "But yes, you made it." Lynn blinked, studying him. "How long have I been out?" 2 days. Fever broke last night. You are healing well, considering." She sank back into the pillows, trying to process everything. "I can't believe I'm still alive. And that you used leaves and roots to do it." Caleb gave a small nod. "Nature gives us what we need, if we know how to look." There was something steadying about him, his quiet, grounded energy. Lynn watched him move, his gestures deliberate, methodical. He was unlike anyone she had ever met. In her world, everything was rushed, optimized, scheduled. Caleb operated in a rhythm entirely his own. Over the next few days, Caleb tended to her gently but without fuss. He made herbal teas that helped her sleep, soups from foraged greens and wild mushrooms, and poultices that soothed the swelling in her leg. Lynn, still too weak to walk far, spent her hours watching the forest outside the window, listening to the wind, and talking to Caleb when he would allow it. He was not talkative by nature, but slowly, cautiously, he opened up. She learned he had been a military medic, Army. He had seen things in war that never left him, the kind of wounds that live deep in the soul. After losing a fellow soldier, a close friend, in a roadside bombing, Caleb had walked away from everything: city, family, noise. He bought a plot of land near the forest and built the cabin himself. "I came out here to forget," he said once, "but I stayed to remember differently." Lynn was captivated, not just by his story, but by him. His stillness, his resilience, and more than that, the unspoken kindness that seemed to guide his every action. For the first time in years, she felt something inside her quiet, not gone, but softened. "You're not what I expected," she said one morning, sitting outside the cabin wrapped in a blanket as Caleb chopped firewood nearby. He raised an eyebrow. "And what did you expect?" "I don't know, some wild mountain man. You're surprisingly wise." He smiled faintly. "That's a polite way of saying I'm old." "I didn't say that. You thought it." She laughed, the sound startling both of them. It had been days since either had heard laughter, but the peaceful rhythm they had settled into was suddenly broken one late afternoon. Lynn was alone in the cabin, dozing lightly, when a sound pulled her from sleep, a heavy rustling, leaves cracking. Something large moving through the brush just beyond the clearing. She sat up, heart racing, and moved slowly to the window. A black bear. It was enormous, lumbering along the edge of the trees, sniffing the air. It moved with slow curiosity, head swaying. Lynn's breath caught. The bear was coming closer, too close. She backed away, stumbling over a stool and falling hard. The crash startled the bear. It paused, ears up. Lynn scrambled for the door but froze, paralyzed with fear. Just then, Caleb appeared at the edge of the clearing, returning with a bundle of firewood slung over his shoulder. He saw the bear, dropped the wood. His posture shifted immediately, calm, authoritative. "Stay inside," he said to Lynn, his voice low and commanding. She nodded, ducking behind the doorframe, peeking through a crack. Caleb moved slowly to the fire pit and grabbed a tin pan. With measured movements, he banged it against a metal pot, creating a loud clatter. He did not shout, he did not run, just firm, rhythmic noise. The bear hesitated, then turned, lumbering back into the woods. The trees swallowed it whole. Only when the clearing was empty did Caleb lower the pan. He looked toward the cabin, saw Lynn's pale face peeking out, and gave a single nod. Later, when she could breathe again, she said, "You weren't even scared." "I was," he admitted. "I just know how to be scared, without letting it decide what happens next." She watched him in silence, feeling the way her heart still pounded, and wondered how it was possible for a stranger to make her feel safer than anyone ever had. The days that followed settled into a quiet, almost sacred rhythm. Lynn stayed, not because she had to, she could walk now, the swelling in her leg nearly gone, but because something within her was beginning to change. For the first time in years, she felt still, grounded, as though each breath she took in the woods was undoing knots she had carried inside for far too long. She asked Caleb if he would teach her. At first, he looked surprised. "Teach you what?" "How to survive like you do," she said. "How to know which leaf heals and which one kills, how to live without needing everything else." He nodded once. "All right." Each morning they ventured a little farther from the cabin. Caleb taught her how to recognize the subtle differences between poisonous and medicinal plants, how to follow animal tracks, how to listen for the language of the woods. The crunch of a deer's hoof, the warning caw of a crow, the silence before a storm. Lynn absorbed it all, her mind sharp, her heart open. There was no pretense between them, no distractions. She did not care that her hair was tangled or her hands were dirty. Caleb did not ask about her past, and she did not volunteer it. They existed in a present moment that felt more real than any boardroom or luxury apartment ever had. One afternoon they returned to the cabin after foraging. Caleb was carrying a small basket of roots and mushrooms, explaining how the soil composition affected the potency of different herbs. Lynn listened, laughing as he recounted the time he had mistaken wild ginger for a look-alike that left him with a week-long stomachache. But as they approached the steps to the porch, Caleb's foot caught on a loose stone. He stumbled, the basket flying from his hands, and fell hard onto the wooden steps. "Caleb!" Lynn rushed to his side, heart pounding. He grimaced, trying to sit up. "I am all right, just twisted something maybe." "Don't move," she said, her voice sharper than she expected. "You could have hit your head." She knelt beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she checked him over. His ankle was swelling already, and a scrape on his forearm was bleeding steadily. "I have seen worse," Caleb said, attempting a half-smile. "I have not," she replied, her throat tight, "and I do not want to." Together, they managed to get him inside. Lynn cleaned the wound with water and a clean cloth, just as he had done for her days before. She found the poultices he had used, mimicking his method, wrapping his arm with care and tenderness. The roles had reversed, but her gratitude remained, deeper now, wrapped in something she was not ready to name. As night fell and the fire warmed the room, Lynn sat beside Caleb, watching him doze lightly. His face was relaxed, the hard edges softened by sleep and pain. She studied the lines around his eyes, the silver threads in his hair, the quiet strength he carried like a second skin. Something had shifted. What began as survival had become trust, and what grew from trust was something else, gentle, undeniable. She leaned back in the chair and whispered to the room, "I was meant to come here." Caleb stirred but did not wake, and Lynn, heart full and still healing, knew that something in her had come alive again, not just her body, but something much harder to reach. The morning sun cast long shadows through the trees, filtering into the cabin and gently waking Lynn before Caleb. She sat up slowly on her cot, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing across the room. The peace of the forest had seeped into her bones. Her leg was nearly healed now, strong enough to walk through the woods without wincing, but with each passing day the reality of the outside world pressed a little harder against the silence she had come to cherish. Lynn stood, wrapped herself in the old flannel shirt Caleb had given her, and stepped outside. The morning was cool and alive, birds calling from the treetops, dew clinging to the tall grass. She wandered toward the edge of the clearing, her thoughts tangled. It was time. She had known for days that she could not keep hiding behind pine trees and wildflowers. Caleb deserved to know the truth. She owed him that, and more. Later that morning, she found him sitting near the fire pit, sharpening a knife with practiced care. His expression, as always, was calm, unreadable. She sat beside him, heart pounding. "I need to tell you something," she said softly. He glanced at her, sensing the weight behind her words. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "My name is Lynn Bennett. My father is Richard Bennett, the CEO of Bennett International." Caleb paused mid-stroke. "The hotel chain?" "Yes." She stared into the fire. "I'm his only child, which means I'm supposed to be the heir." Caleb set the knife down. He did not speak, but his stillness said everything. Lynn continued, her voice steadier than she felt. "I was engaged to marry Thomas Grayson. He's the son of a real estate magnate, and the wedding was more about merging empires than love. I never wanted it. I never wanted any of it. Not the life planned out for me, not the name I never earned, not the spotlight." She met his eyes. "I ran away 3 weeks before the wedding, packed a bag, turned off my phone, and disappeared into the one place I thought no one would find me." "The wilderness," Caleb said quietly. She nodded. "I just wanted to breathe, to remember who I am when no one's watching." For a long moment he said nothing. Then finally, "Why tell me now?" "Because I trust you, and because I know it changes things." Caleb looked at her, really looked, and she saw the storm behind his eyes. Then he said something she did not expect. "It does not change who you are. Not to me." Lynn blinked. "Really? You are still the woman who fought to stay alive, the one who laughed at my old jokes and cried when I twisted my ankle. The forest does not care about your last name, and neither do I." Emotion welled up inside her, but before she could respond, a low rumble cut through the stillness, the unmistakable thump-thump of helicopter blades. Lynn's eyes widened. Caleb stood, eyes scanning the sky. "No," she whispered. He turned to her. "Did you leave any way for them to track you?" "No, nothing. I didn't." She stopped. Her breath caught. "The trail camera. I passed one before I got bitten. My face might have triggered it." The sound grew louder, closer. Within minutes, a sleek black helicopter descended into the clearing, flattening the tall grass with its wind. Dust and leaves spun into the air. Lynn shielded her face as men in dark suits jumped out, some with radios, others calling her name. "Miss Bennett?" "Lynn, thank God we found you." One of them ran forward, clearly the lead. "Your father has been worried sick. We've had search teams out for days." Lynn's heart pounded. She looked at Caleb, whose face had hardened, neutral but distant. "You're leaving," he said. "I did not plan for this," she replied, tears in her eyes. "I did not want to be found." The man stepped closer. "We have to go. Your father is expecting you. The press is waiting for a statement." "I need a minute," she said sharply. He nodded, backing away, leaving her and Caleb in a pocket of fading calm. She turned to him, reaching for his hand. "I am not ready to leave." He squeezed her fingers gently. "But you have to." "I do not belong in that world." "You do," he said softly. "And maybe one day you will find a way to belong in both." Her voice cracked. "What if I do not want both?" Caleb's eyes held hers. "Then you decide what matters most. But you should go for now, not because you are running, but because you are choosing." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Will you wait for me?" "I do not go many places," he said with a faint smile. "You know where to find me." As the helicopter lifted off, Lynn looked down at the cabin, the forest, at Caleb standing still in the clearing. She pressed a hand to the window, watching him shrink beneath the rising machine. Part of her heart stayed behind with him, in the silence, the smoke, the earth. The rest was flying back into the noise of a world she had tried so hard to escape. The city felt like another planet. The moment Lynn stepped out of the helicopter onto the rooftop helipad of the Bennett International headquarters, the world rushed at her, flashing cameras, security teams, staff members in crisp suits, and the distant hum of traffic below. She blinked beneath the bright sky, her skin still smelling faintly of pine and smoke. The noise, the pace, the sheer weight of it all made her stomach twist. She was escorted into the penthouse suite, where her father lay in a hospital bed, temporarily moved to the office for comfort and familiarity. Richard Bennett looked smaller than she remembered, a man diminished not only by illness but by years of shouldering an empire. "Lynn," his voice cracked with emotion, You came back." She sat beside him, taking his hand gently. "I had to." "You had the world in chaos," he said with a raspy chuckle. "Disappearing like that, you made headlines across the globe." "I know," she said softly, "but I had to disappear to find myself." He looked at her, really looked, as if seeing her anew. "I need you to take over, Lynn. I built this company for you. Everything, every deal, every late night, every sacrifice was so you would never have to struggle." She swallowed. "Dad, I know what this company means to you. I respect what you built, but I cannot be who you want me to be. You have no idea how hard this world can be without power," he said. "I do," she replied. "I lived without power, and for the first time I found peace." He tried to argue, but she gently squeezed his hand. "I'm not abandoning the family. I'm just not becoming someone I never chose to be." The next days were a blur of meetings, offers, media speculation. Lynn remained calm. She reviewed her inheritance, her holdings, and what her role would entail. Then, without warning, she began redirecting assets, establishing a new trust to support forest conservation efforts, launching a fund to provide environmental education for underprivileged youth, and donating large portions of her fortune to wilderness rescue services. The same kinds of people who might one day save someone like her. The board was furious. The press was confused. But Lynn had never felt more certain. And then came the press conference. She stood before a sea of cameras, her image projected on screens, her voice poised to reach millions. Her hair was pulled back simply, her clothing modest but elegant. There was no PR handler, no teleprompter. Just her. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know there's been a great deal of speculation about my disappearance, my return, and my future with Bennett International." She paused, inhaling. "For years I followed a path that was paved for me before I was old enough to walk. I attended the best schools, wore the right clothes, shook the right hands, and for a long time I thought that was enough. But I was wrong." Cameras clicked furiously. Whispers rippled across the room. 3 weeks ago, I was lost in the Oregon wilderness. I nearly died. And I was saved, not by technology, not by privilege, but by a man who lives simply and understands the value of life beyond profit. He reminded me that we are not measured by what we own, but by what we protect. Her voice grew stronger. "I am stepping down from any executive position within Bennett International. I will not lead the company. I will not inherit the throne I never wanted. Instead, I am choosing to dedicate my life to something I believe in, protecting the natural world that saved mine." Reporters gasped. Some stood, others fired questions. Lynn held up a hand. "I have redirected a significant portion of my inheritance into a foundation committed to preserving forests, educating the next generation, and funding wilderness rescue operations. I will not return to the boardroom. My future lies elsewhere, closer to the earth and closer to the person I have finally become." There was silence. For the first time perhaps in her entire life, Lynn was not trying to meet anyone's expectations. She was simply telling the truth. After the conference, as the chaos continued to unfold behind her, she stepped into a quiet hallway away from the cameras. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. She thought of Caleb. She thought of the firelight dancing on the cabin walls, the scent of herbs, the sound of his voice in the stillness. She had made her choice, and now it was time to go home. The forest greeted her like an old friend, the scent of damp moss, the whisper of wind threading through the towering pines, the uneven crunch of earth beneath her boots. It all rushed back to Lynn like breath after holding it for too long. Her backpack was light, but her heart was heavier than ever, full of anticipation, full of hope. She did not send word ahead. She wanted to return the way she had first arrived, unexpectedly, authentically. The trail was familiar now, though the terrain still challenged her. She moved carefully, using the landmarks Caleb had once pointed out, the leaning cedar, the forked rock, the fallen log shaped like a bridge. Each one brought her closer to him. The cabin came into view just as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the clearing. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, and the garden Caleb had tended was still thriving with wild greens and herbs. Her heart pounded. She stepped into the clearing. Inside the cabin, Caleb was packing. His belongings were few, but his movements were slow, deliberate. He paused now and then, looking around the room as if trying to memorize it, even though it was a place he had built with his own hands. The silence had grown too loud since Lynn left. Every time he looked toward the path leading away from the cabin, he half expected her to appear, but she never did. Until now. A soft knock echoed on the wooden door. Caleb froze, staring at it, disbelieving. For a moment, he thought it might be an illusion born of longing, but then another knock, stronger this time, more certain. He crossed the room and pulled the door open. There she stood, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with emotion, the same flannel shirt tied around her waist, her hair tousled by the wind. Lynn didn't wait for him to speak. She stepped forward and threw her arms around him, burying her face into his chest. Caleb staggered slightly but caught her, his arms wrapping tightly around her as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. She whispered into his shirt, voice trembling, "You saved my life, but you also gave me a reason to live." Caleb held her tighter. He did not ask why she had come back. He did not need to. When she finally pulled back, her hand still resting on his chest, she looked up into his eyes. "I thought I needed to run away from my life to find peace. But I learned something. I needed to choose. I chose this. I chose you." He searched her face, reading every word in her expression, every truth in her silence. Then, finally, he said, "I was about to leave." Her brows knit. "Why?" "Because I thought I had lost something I never truly had. I could not stay here with ghosts." She reached up and touched his cheek gently. "Well, I am not a ghost." "No," he said, his voice thick. "You are the most real thing that has ever walked into my life." She smiled through the tears welling in her eyes. "Then let's stop walking away from each other." He nodded slowly, then stepped aside, holding the door open wide. Lynn entered, shedding the weight of the world at the threshold, stepping into the warm glow of the fire and the stillness of the life she had chosen, not as a visitor this time, but as someone who had come home. That night, under the stars and beside the fire, they sat side by side in silence. No plans, no promises, just presence. And for the first time in both their lives, that was more than enough. Months passed, and the forest changed with the seasons. The crispness of fall turned the leaves into a cascade of amber and gold. Snow came softly after that, blanketing the trees and silencing the world in white. Spring returned with wildflowers bursting from the thawed ground, and with it came something even more extraordinary. Hope reborn, not just in nature, but in the life Caleb and Lynn had built together. They did not return to the world as it was. Instead, they invited the world to come to them. It began with an idea, simple, clear, rooted in purpose. A center where people could learn to navigate the wilderness safely, to respect the power and healing of nature, and to find peace far from concrete and noise. Caleb had the knowledge, Lynn had the resources. Together they built something that was neither hers nor his, but entirely theirs. The Wildhaven Institute, set in the same clearing where Caleb's old cabin stood, now expanded and strengthened, it became a sanctuary for those seeking to reconnect with the natural world. They offered workshops on herbal medicine, survival skills, and environmental stewardship. Rescue teams were trained there, using Caleb's methods and Lynn's funding to prepare for emergencies in the deep woods. Guests came from all walks of life, hikers, students, even corporate executives burned out from a world that moved too fast. Word spread, not through marketing or media blitzes, but through stories, shared by those who had come to the forest and left changed. People spoke of the man who could name every tree by its leaves, who carried quiet wisdom in his silence, and of the woman with fire in her heart, who walked away from a billion-dollar empire, not in rebellion, but in pursuit of something more sacred, truth. Their love was not flashy, it was not loud or extravagant. It was seen in the way they moved together, in the way Lynn laughed more freely now, in the way Caleb's eyes softened when he looked at her. It was heard in the echo of their shared footsteps on the trails, in the warmth of their laughter around a fire with volunteers, in the stillness of a morning where neither had to speak to feel understood. Visitors often asked, "Is it true? The story about how you two met?" Lynn would smile. "I almost died." Caleb would add dryly, "She was a terrible patient," and they would both laugh, the kind of laughter that comes only from having lived through something worth remembering. Together, they taught others not just how to survive, but how to live, fully, simply. And in the evenings, when the work was done, and the sky turned shades of lavender and rose, Lynn and Caleb would walk the trail behind their home, hand in hand, their fingers interlaced like the roots of the trees around them, separate but always connected. On one such evening they reached their favorite spot, a rise overlooking the valley, where the last light of the day touched the treetops like gold. Lynn leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder. "Do you think we'll ever go back? To the city?" She nodded. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe. One day. If we need to. But not because we are running from anything," she smiled. "We're not running anymore." "No," he agreed. "We are right where we belong." They stood in silence, watching as the sun dipped behind the mountains, its final rays bathing the forest in a warm, amber glow. Birds called to each other in the distance. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and for that moment, the world stood still. Lynn turned to Caleb, her eyes reflecting the sky. "You once told me I was lucky you were nearby." "I remember. I think I was lucky for a lot more than that." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "So was I." And there, in the heart of the forest that had once brought them together through danger and chance, Lynn and Caleb stood side by side, two souls who had wandered, survived, and found something greater than either had ever imagined, not just love, but home. Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us to exactly where we are meant to be. In the silence of the forest, amidst danger and solitude, Lynn and Caleb found not only survival, but purpose, peace, and love. Their story is a reminder that healing can come from the wildest places, and that when we dare to live truthfully, we often find something far more beautiful than what we were running from. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or simply gave you a moment of warmth, we invite you to join our community of listeners who believe in the power of heartfelt storytelling. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more true-to-life tales of resilience, love, and redemption. Stories that heal the soul and stay with you long after they end. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.